All right, so all right, everybody. Our next speaker is Chrissy Geluk, founder of Librarian at Your Service, and Chrissy's here to provide a Power BI topic. Welcome, Chrissy.
Oh, thank you, Jason. And glad to be here virtually, and love Philly. Would have been great to be there in person as well, but hey, next best thing is through MS Teams. As Jason mentioned, I am Chrissy Geluk, and I'm the principal and founder of Librarian at Your Service. You could always reach me or tweet out the session on Twitter. My handle is CM Geluk, and we're going to be talking a little about Power BI, the anatomy, and its deliverables. There we go. All right. The slides did not want to advance. All right. First, a big shout out to the sponsors of M365 Philly, or also SVS Philly, however you would want to refer to, and that's the Tri-State User Group, the Soho Dragon, and Tech Platform. Of course, without sponsors, it would make it more of a challenge for the organizers to bring all these wonderful events to you. I will be repeating these slides at the end. So if you don't get a chance to scan the QR code to provide feedback, whether it's for the event, that's the one on the right. And the one on the left. And out of the corner of my eye, I realize you're not seeing the QR codes yet. Ooh. Okay, come on. There we go. Okay. So now we're all on the same page. So both the organizers and myself, we always love to hear feedback because, and as can't really speak for anyone but myself, but I love to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's how I improve all the sessions that I be able to give. So don't be hesitant to give feedback. And that's the same also with the event feedback, because with more feedback, that's how we can provide and improve sessions in the future. So there's the QR code and the link. I will be repeating these slides at the end during the Q&A period. So I'm going to actually talk a little bit about myself, because any form of contact, whether it's through the social profiles, email, can be found on my website. That's at librarianatyourservice.com. And in just a moment, you will be seeing this nice little word cloud that consists of themes, adjectives, nouns, however you may like to refer them, that describe me both professionally and personally. And as my name of the company insinuates, I am a librarian. That's what I have my graduate degree in information science, and my undergrad is a mathematician. And though my husband and I, we do live just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, I am an original Jersey girl. Yes, a Jersey girl giving speaking at a Philly conference, and a North Jersey girl at that. Okay, but with that said, I deal with all forms of data, competitive intelligence, patents, and dabbling in all things O365, M365, including Power BI. What we're going to be talking about today is, of course, Power BI. And the general topics will be an overview, talking about transforming that data into knowledge, and with a prayer to the demo gods, a live build demonstrating the techniques that we've talked about. And then we'll bring it back to the slide deck with a recap and a summary of a couple of resources that you could follow through, whether you're completely new to Power BI or like to refer back if you've been using it for a while. When talking about Power BI, there's something that you need to emphasize, is that when it comes to Power BI, it consists of two complementary tools. There's the Power BI desktop and then the Power BI service. Power BI service is the web application. And where you could use them independently, they are complementary tools that for the desired goal, you would use one or the other. Especially when you're modeling the data, you're going to be using Power BI desktop. Now that Venn diagram shows the difference between the two. And speaking of Power BI, there's the free version of Power BI, and there is the fee version called Power BI Pro, not to be confused with Power BI Premium. And the list there is a couple of examples of the advantages, the benefits of Power BI Pro over Power BI. I link out a site, a blog article that is already a little over 2 years old, but it's still relevant because especially if you're still really getting into Power BI, it summarizes the differences, and it even includes the differences with Power BI Premium, not to be confused with Power BI Pro. When you're building or transforming that data into knowledge, you're going to have your raw data that you're going to clean and normalize and develop the pages or page. You know, who knows, you may want to, as you get started, just play around with just one single page, and a report could be a single page. It doesn't have to be. But you could build up those pages as a single report and then develop it into a dashboard and then share it. For those that like a little trivia, I'm not going to play the video there, but these slides will be shared out. I'll be sharing it on my website, and also the organizers of M365 Philly will be playing it out. But Power BI, as many of you may know, is not really a new product. It's really been around for more than a decade. And that video is one of the engineers, Amir Nets, being interviewed at what appears to be maybe the predecessor of Ignite, talking about this new product that didn't have its brand label yet, called Project Crescent. So, and he's talking about the big thing in data legislation. So I do recommend just giving it a watch. It's an entertaining video. When it comes to Power BI, and I promise we're going to be getting into some live stuff, I cannot stress enough the crowdsourcing for suggestions and feedback with Power BI. As you know, many Microsoft products have a crowdsourcing platform, usually through the medium user voice. With Power BI, it's Power BI Ideas. And what you're looking at there is really the latest screenshot that I snagged just so you can see how it changes of the ranking of ideas. And the reason why this is important is that if you're working with Power BI, you want to make sure that that Microsoft receives feedback, because that's how they improve the product, and that shows the development of the product. When you get into Power BI, whether you're new or if you're already been working with transforming that data into knowledge and into the story, I would definitely recommend you become a Power BI administrator, because with a Power BI administrator, you don't have to be an O365 or M365 administrator. Those folks can assign those key Power BI users as admins. And there's a benefit to that, because then you take ownership of the Power BI workspace with branding and being able to review the metrics for the various workspaces. So, you know, again, all the resources that are about the Power BI administration, the Power BI ideas, are all in the slide, and they're all at the end. So when it comes to transforming that data, it is an iterative process. And it starts from really the concept, the idea. And then from that concept of the idea, you want to identify your data sources, gather the data, then you take that data and import it into Power BI, and that is where you're actually going to transform, and what I like to call the clean and normalize, which that subset is also another iterative process. So, and because you're going to need to go back to it as you build your visuals. So you build your visuals in Power BI Desktop, save, and then you publish it to the web. And then you can share, and you're going to be sharing it through the medium of the web app, the Power BI service. Now, what you're looking at there is the number of ways of how to share. That little screenshot on the left is mobile. I have an Android, but yes, it works on iOS, works on the iPhone. That middle graphic is a SharePoint page, and the third is MS Teams. So however your audience, whether that's a small or a large team or your entire organization, wants to receive, or how you want to share that data, you'll be able to work out whichever medium. Now, of course, there's a number of other ways they could share it as well, including Power Apps, but that's just the example. Now it's a matter of transforming the data. We are about to pause here to go online, which I'm sure most of you are probably excited about because, as I promised, it's not going to be all about the slide deck and the PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. All right, just switching screens. We'll give that a moment, and feel free to push forth any questions, and I'll address the questions towards the end. And I see something happening. Okay, it's getting there. So the example that we're going to build is an example since, well, what it has prompted us to really rethink our work and lifestyle habits is virtual characteristics. And what's prompting that is, of course, the pandemic. So I thought, what no other to leverage data that is capturing statistics from the pandemic from two different sources. And I'll get it back. And the two sources being used, and they're completely different, but this is how one would tell the story, because you may be realizing that you may want to compare or really see, you know, if there's any correlation or even causation for that matter between the statistics of the pandemic, and I'm grabbing it from the Institute of Health Metrics, which is based out of the state of Washington. Take it off. So if you want to play around with it yourself, you could just go to, or you could Bing or Google IHME, go to the main site, and just limiting it. Well, you could filter the web to be the US, but you can go ahead and they allow you to download the entire data set. So I've already done that, downloaded the data set. It is in a CSV file, and they pretty much do update the data daily. So you could even really create your own dashboard using this data. In fact, the famous Johns Hopkins dashboard, this is one of the data sources that they also use. So we have that. But in this particular case, we're going to try to build some sort of correlationship between the some pandemic data sets and data sets from the Big Cities Health Coalition. And that really talks about some stats based on certain parameters. Now, this one's listed there, but here are all the other categories that they actually look at, including cancer, life expectancy. Now, the the thing to keep in mind when the fact that we're going to use this as an example is this data set, unlike the data from IHME, only captures data from certain cities. So that's something that, you know, you just have to be aware of and make notations should you be telling the story. But with drawing the relationships, and be interesting to see if there's any correlation with certain diseases and certain areas of the country between and with the pandemic. So again, with BHBC, it does have the ability to download the complete data set. So we downloaded that. Now, in many cases, when you're building the data, now, of course, we already have the Power BI open. And we'll give it a second a bit.
While you're waiting for that to load,
Sure.
we have one request that you zoom in a little bit on the content. And then the video and the audio delays are in sync, so you have to wait for the video to catch up.
Include me. Oh, yes, that's what I was trying. Yep. Thank you, Jenny said. And with zooming, interesting, because I haven't maximized on my screen. But, okay, let's see. As I zoom in, I'll try to bring in, okay, we're going to go back when start working with Power BI, because now we're looking at the Power BI application, the desktop application. And let's just pretend that we're going to either update the the source data of this Power BI report, or we're going to adjust. Interesting. There's still a delay. Wow, there is a really bad delay. Okay. So we'll so let's just pretend it's a completely blank report. And one of the things, there we go. Now, of course, you don't really have to, I don't really have to zoom in here, because as you start working with Power BI, just like with any other desktop application, it's going to list any of your recent files. But a couple of features I do want to really bring to folks' attention is your options and settings, because it's worthwhile Okay, let that pull up to review these settings. Okay. All right. It's almost there. Come on, catch up, catch up. There we go. So it should pop up. There we go. Ooh, okay. Trying to, It's really bad. Yeah, I tried zooming in a little bit on that, so it's gonna, but this dialog box, you could just pull it up. It's both various settings, like the one that I want to bring in to mind is the preview features. Some of the new features, like one of the ones that came out in this month's update, is the Azure Map visual. And that may not be checked off by default, so you may want to check it off. Or let's say if you don't want to see any of the previews, don't have it checked off. But it's a good thing that every once in a while, just go ahead and review your settings to see if there's any modifications you may need to make. Typically, the Argus maps are not on by default. So you want to make sure that that's on. And then, of course, there's the settings for the local file. I won't go through all of them, but that's something to just keep in mind, that it's worthwhile. To look into. And your data source settings, and I'll wait a bit until the view catches up. Okay, so your data source settings will be worthwhile to review should you want to at least confirm or change any of the permissions that are required in order to source the data. Because you could either have it that it could be automatically refreshed with new data, or you can manually update that data, but you want to make sure that Power BI has the proper permissions to extract the data so it's constantly refreshed. So that's another thing to just keep aware of refreshing those settings. So now with gathering the data, the data sets in this example are both Excel. So just a matter of just selecting Get Data, Excel, and then pulling in whichever data set you require. Since I've already grabbed the data, I'm not going to be loading it, but I'm going to go ahead. Now I know I'm a little bit ahead, but that's okay, because I'm going to pause at the point where it's needed. So you're just going to grab the Excel. When it comes to Excel, I definitely recommend that if your data set is in a CSV file, really update that to at least an XLS file, because it will make it easier for Power BI to recognize. So because the CSV file is pretty much would be recognized more or less as a text file. So once you pull in the data that you want, you're going to select it. There's a preview of it, and you're going to have two options to bring it in. There's load and transform. My recommendation is really select the transform. Now remember what I said is that the actual transforming data, which I like to say clean and normalize, can be an iterative process, because you may be doing this as you build your reports, build your pages, when you're going back and forth, or even adding other data to set the relationships. So, but at the first glance, you may want to just go ahead and just go through and see if at least the first glance Power BI has recognized the data and the type that's anticipated. Now, in this particular case, it has, it's recognized as pretty much all as numbers, except the location is text, which is fine. The date is date. Had the date been, let's say, just a year, 2020, 2019, an example, that could be an example of a data type that would be truly recognized as what you may not want. Because being that a year is a number, it will recognize that as a number. But a year, you don't want to treat it like a number. So that would be something that you would change to text. And I'm just going to go ahead with that. We're going to cancel out of that. And of course, this is the date there. But one thing I want to emphasize a bit, and let's see, I'm going to maximize that a bit. Let's see if it gets a little bigger so you don't have to squint on the screen. And we'll wait a couple of seconds while it hopefully, come on. Okay. And come on. All right, because I try to maximize it, just taking a little longer for it to. There we go. Hopefully that. Still kind of tiny. So on the right, and this is true with anything that you transform in Power BI, any task that you apply as you work with the data, the raw data, will be captured under the applied steps. Now, this is a good thing because let's say, I just gave the example, and this was just not a true example because that date was, was correctly classified as date. But had that been just a year, it would have been a number. You would have wanted to do as text. But let's say you want to just change your mind. Say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. You can go ahead and just X that out, and voila, it's back. We didn't go back to the date. We're going to change in this particular case, go back to the date. And it just cancels out that step. So that's something just to keep an eye on your history, because think of the applied steps as your history. So if you're working with the data and you realize that you went too far, it's like, oh, that doesn't work. And especially if you're really just playing around, really involving your skills and techniques, this is where you can just go and toggle back and forth. Once you at least really did that first pass of the cleanup and the normalization, you can go ahead and close and apply. In this particular case, since I've already loaded it, I'm just going to close it because I don't want it for it to be changed. Because I've already added it in. Now, as it's added in, right, it's going to bring you back to your workspace in Power BI Desktop, where you will be building your visuals. And we're back. Yes. Okay. Not exactly the most updated, but at least we're on the same page, per se. You're going to have all the data sets that you brought in on the right-hand side. Most of them I have expanded. Now, if you notice them, some of them are labeled with short labels and some are long. I purposely left this in here because the data set, which is a subset of the data set from the Institute of Health metrics, that's how that label was brought in, because that was the name. You can go ahead and I'm just going to do IHNE. Of course, it can just be completely random. And you'll see that I'll just click on that ellipsis, select rename from the menu, and then rename it an arbitrary name. Of course, it's not necessary, but when you're working with multiple data sets, you want to at least be able to see the full label. So it's just that one little tip. It's not going to really affect how you build the visuals, but it just makes it easier to navigate through. And as you build your visuals, before going through that, I want to draw your attention to the gallery of visuals that you have immediate access to. But I recommend every once in a while selecting on that ellipsis from your the middle screen for visuals and pull up the app source. And from that app source, you can pull in additional visuals that you may want to add to the story that you're developing. So there's the word cloud. As you start to build the visuals, I recommend first starting off with at least the ones that have been certified. Not to say that the others aren't good, but you know, the app source, these widgets have been added through the community, and there might be in process of working. So the ones that aren't certified, there's a chance that it may or may not work with your data. So you could still work with it, but that's something just to keep in mind, especially if you want to at least increase your expectations of how that visual will work with your data. So we definitely work, either use the Power BI certified or even the editor's picks. And sometimes there's actually an overlap. So once you do that, you could start building your visual. Now, the very first one that I want to draw into, and this talks about a particular feature in Power BI that you could really manipulate your own data, are the measures. And the measures are really calculations. And we'll wait for the app source dialog to disappear. So since it's covering So this card is really built on, it was a measure. So to build any particular measure, and when you first start playing around measures, I definitely would recommend looking into the quick measures, because it's really a guided process that you could specify which calculation you want to start off with. So let's say we're going to try out the average there, and you want the let's see, now actually this is the BHC one, so just going to go ahead. I've already built one there, but just well, it'll replicate it again. So we want the value in here. You could just drag and drop. I'm going to specify distinct, and we're going to indicate it as an indicator. And as that's built, I'm going to drop in a card, just a blank card in there. And this is just the rate. And for any visual that you build and you bring in your values, whether it's really a table or the series of the bar graphs or the value, the pick list, you have the ability to clean up the visual, because by default, it will give the label of your visual. You could always rename it here if you want, or you could actually, in this particular case, since it's a card, it's going to be called a category. We could turn that off, but then you could give it a title. Average rate. Let's go. Average rate, like that. And let's change the alignment a bit. Let's give it a blue color. And let's give it, let's go with yellow. Like that. You know, of course, this is all arbitrary. So, but the idea here is that when you're building your visuals, of course, the focus should be on the actual data. But then after you set the data, you want to make that visual more appealing. So that's where you would add in the styling. So, you know, and that holds true with each of the visuals, whether it's a card, table, bar chart. And it's not limited to the actual background. So we'll wait a bit. When you're on the page level, not selecting any of the visuals, you can then select if you want a particular color for your background. If you see here, we'll wait for that to catch up. It's a peach color, or at least it looks peach to me. I don't know. Or that could be changed to like a blue, or you can even add an image, or you can even add a wallpaper. Again, this is all arbitrary, and this is something that you may want to add, especially if you're building multiple reports into a single dashboard or sharing with the team, that you want to have some cohesiveness. And when you're done, you would actually just select publish, and this is where you're bringing that raw data that you transformed into pages into the same report, and then you're now publishing it to the Power BI service, which is the web application. And we'll give it a moment. And once you publish it to the Power BI service, you'll see that you're looking at it in the medium of how your audience will receive the data. And we'll wait. And there we go. Okay, I did not publish it in the blue color. This was already there. So if you're wondering what it looks like, but if you notice, remember that tip that I mentioned, that making sure of renaming your pages of something more meaningful, because those page labels can act like table of contents, which may make it easier for your audience to receive, whether it's your team, the organization, or whomever's consuming that data. So this in itself is a report, which can be shared as it, or you can create a dashboard, and a dashboard is a selection of visuals. And the way that you would create that dashboard is when you hover over each and every visual, you will see that little thumbtack. When you click on that and select that visual, you're adding it to the dashboard. So that's why I'm saying really dashboards can be optional, because you can still share it in the report stage. So it really all depends on what story you want to tell. And then when it comes to sharing, especially if you want to share it to a SharePoint site, you want to go in and just select, oh, sorry, I clicked on the wrong one. Sorry about that. You want to click on your ellipsis, and we'll wait for it to catch up. And you want to just scroll down to embed and select SharePoint Online. Okay, it's almost there. All right, so there's the visual. Okay, yeah, that's sharing if you wanted to share it via email with a fellow Power BI Pro user. But if you want to embed it into SharePoint, you want to click on that ellipsis, select embed, and select SharePoint Online. And that will feed a URL, and you're going to take that URL and then feed it into a SharePoint page using the Power BI widget, because the Power BI widget will prompt you for that link. And then it'll specify which page you may want. And I'm watching the time there. And I want to leave time in case there's questions, especially. And so there's the SharePoint page. You would just edit the SharePoint page, add in the Power BI widget. It'll prompt you for the URL. Uh-oh. Did I lose sight? No. And then last but not least, we're just going to recap with a few of the tips that I talked about in the earlier part of the session, and a few of the resources. Most of it is from the Microsoft documentation, the links to the crowdsourcing, the Power BI ideas. And if you want to learn more, if you haven't already participated in any of the user group communities, you can find a lot of the Power BI communities on the Power Platform and the dynamic communities. And I want to give a shout out to what I like to call the Power BI gurus, Adam Sexton and Patrick LeBlanc. And of course, the folks at the BI Focal Show, Jason Himmelstein and John White. They are very active on Twitter, and they have podcasts and their own YouTube channels. Of course, you could follow me. I'm working my up to be a guru, but perhaps we could learn together. Hopefully the out of sync between my voice and the slide wasn't too painful. Again, the slides will be available as well as the videos. And I welcome any questions. To echoing one of my favorite thespians, who's was a playwright, James Thurber. It's better to know some of the questions than all of the answers, which means if there's any questions I do not answer, I promise I will get back to you. You could always find me in all forms of communication at librarian@yourservice.com. And again, those are the QR codes for the event feedback on the right and my feedback on the left. And I thank you.